When I was in 6th grade, my family moved to a small town in Indiana. The kind of town where everyone knows everyone and the school looks like it's been standing for 100 years. The building had long hallways with flickering lights and old portraits hanging on every wall, paintings of people who used to work there, principals, teachers, even donors. My homeroom teacher, Mrs. Evans, said the school was built in 1928 and that every painting in the hallway was original. I didn't think much of it back then, but there was one that always bothered me. It hung near the staircase leading to the basement, a place students weren't allowed to go. The painting was of a woman, pale skin, black hair tied tightly in a bun, and eyes that seemed too real. The plaque beneath read, Ms. Eleanor Westwood, Headmistress, 1932-1946. She didn't smile. Her expression was stern, almost angry. But what scared me most were her eyes. They weren't like normal painted eyes. No matter where you stood, it looked like she was watching you. Every time I passed that staircase, I'd feel something cold run down my spine. Some kids even said her eyes moved sometimes. I laughed it off because that is what you do when you were scared. You pretend it as funny. But one morning when I was walking past it alone, I could have sworn her head was turned slightly more toward me than usual. A week later, something weird started happening. My friend Noah told me he heard whispering near the basement steps when he stayed late after class. He swore it was a woman's voice calling his name. She sounded old, he said, like a teacher. We told Mrs. Evans, but she said nobody should be down there. The basement was sealed after a flood decades ago. But the more we tried to ignore it, the more it happened. Whispers during study hall, cold air from nowhere, the janitor's mop bucket rolling across the floor by itself. Then one day, the painting was gone, just gone. The frame, the glass, the nail, everything. The wall was bare, except for a faint square where it used to hang. Everyone thought maybe it was being cleaned or repaired. But when we asked the principal, he said, "We don't have a painting of Miss Westwood in this school." That didn't make sense. We'd seen it every day. It was right there. Even Mrs. Evans looked confused when we told her. She said she remembered something hanging there but couldn't recall what. It was like the memory had been wiped from her mind. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I even had a dream about the painting. In the dream, I was walking down the hallway at school. Everything was dark except for a light coming from the staircase. I looked toward it, and there she was, Ms. Westwood, standing in the middle of the hall holding a ruler in her hand, staring straight at me. Her mouth opened slowly, and a voice like static whispered, "You weren't supposed to see me." I woke up drenched in sweat. The next morning, I tried to tell Noah about the dream, but he didn't come to school. Mrs. Evans said he was sick, but when I texted him, there was no reply. 3 days passed, then a week. His parents filed a missing person report. They said he never came home from school that Friday. The police searched everywhere, the park, the woods, the roads, but they found nothing. Our school was closed for 2 days while they investigated. When it reopened, the first thing I noticed was that the painting was back. Same spot, same cold eyes. Only this time, something was different. There was a boy in the background, blurry, faint, but definitely there. His face looked familiar. It was Noah. I thought I was losing my mind. I tried to tell Mrs. Evans, but when I brought her to see it, she just frowned. "There's no boy there," she said. But I could see him clearly, standing behind the headmistress like a ghost trapped in the paint. I even asked my classmates if they saw him. Most said no. A few hesitated, stared for a moment, then shook their heads quickly like they were scared to answer. That night, I dreamed again. The hallway. The same humming sound echoing through it. Only this time, I saw Noah standing beside Ms. Westwood. His eyes were hollow, his mouth slightly open. He raised his hand and pointed at me. "She wants you next," he said, and the lights went out. I woke up screaming. My parents came rushing in, asking what was wrong, but I couldn't explain. It felt too real, too heavy. I didn't go to school the next day. I told my mom I was sick, but really, I was scared. When I finally went back, there was police tape near the basement stairs. They said one of the janitors had gone missing that weekend. The only thing they found was his ring, lying right beneath the painting. The school went into panic mode. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some said the painting was cursed. Others said the basement was haunted. I just wanted to stay as far from that hallway as possible. But curiosity can be stronger than fear. A week later, during lunch, I noticed the janitor's closet was unlocked. It was right next to the staircase. The lights flickered above me, and for a moment I thought I heard my name, faintly from below. Against every bit of sense I had, I stepped inside. There was a small door behind the shelves, half covered with a tarp. I moved it aside and saw a handle, the old basement door. My heart pounded as I pulled it open. The air that hit me was freezing and smelled like wet earth. I aimed my phone's flashlight down the stairs. There were old pipes, broken desks, and boxes covered in dust. I took a few cautious steps down. The deeper I went, the colder it got. Then I saw something glinting in the corner, a piece of glass. I stepped closer, and my breath caught. It was a painting, torn, faded, but unmistakable. Ms. Westwood. Only this version was different. Her eyes were black, her mouth open in a silent scream, and around her were faces, children's faces, painted in gray, reaching out like they were trapped inside. I stumbled back, dropping my phone. As I picked it up, I heard a sound. Footsteps, slow and heavy, coming down the stairs behind me. I turned, shining the light, but there was no one there. Only the sound of breathing, close enough to fog the air in front of me. Then I saw movement. The painting. Her eyes blinked. I swear they did. The children in the background were moving, their mouths opening and closing like they were whispering something. I ran, tripping on the stairs, scraping my knee, but I didn't stop until I was out of the basement and the door was slammed shut behind me. I told Mrs. Evans what I saw, but she looked at me like I was crazy. "There's no basement access anymore," she said. "That door's been sealed for years." When I tried to show her, the door was gone. Just a smooth wall where it used to be. After that, things changed. Kids started saying they saw things in the mirrors or reflections of the windows, faint outlines of children standing behind them. And every week, it felt like someone new went missing. First a student, then a substitute teacher, then another janitor. Every time it happened, the painting seemed fuller. More figures appeared behind Ms. Westwood, their faces faint but recognizable. Then one day I walked into school, and my own reflection in the glass trophy case didn't move when I did. It blinked a second too late. It smiled before I did. And when I turned toward the painting, I saw a new face among the children. My face. I fainted right there in the hallway. When I woke up, the nurse said I'd hit my head. They called my mom to take me home. I told her everything, every detail. She listened quietly, then said something that made my blood turn cold. "When I went to school here," she said softly, "there was a painting like that too. Same woman, same eyes. They took it down after a girl disappeared. Her name was Eleanor Westwood." We moved out of that town 2 months later. The school eventually closed down after more students went missing. They said it was unsafe, old wiring, mold issues. But I know the truth. Last week, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just an old photograph inside of my old school hallway. And there it was again, hanging on the wall behind the staircase. The same painting, the same cold eyes. Only now, there were dozens of faces inside, and in the back corner, barely visible, a new one, a boy looking straight at the camera, smiling. It was me. When I was 9 years old, my uncle gave me a birthday gift I'll never forget. A talking toy bear called Teddy Toons. It was cute, battery operated, and said things like, "I love you," or "Let's play again." But the first night, something felt wrong. When I pressed its paw, it said, "Hi, Daniel." My name. It wasn't programmed to know that. My mom said it was just a coincidence, but days later, I woke to its humming voice in the dark. "Round and round. Don't look down." I whispered, "Stop it," and it replied, "You shouldn't have said that." My parents laughed it off, took out the batteries, and tossed it into the closet. But every morning, the closet door would be open, and the toy would be somewhere else. I finally locked it in a taped box in the attic, but that night I heard footsteps above my bed, slow dragging ones. And the next day, my dad found the box ripped open, the bear sitting in the middle of the attic floor facing the door. He locked it in the garage, yet at 2:17 a.m. I woke to a whisper beside me, "Why did you put me in the dark?" The bear was on my pillow, its red eyes glowing. My dad threw it out the next morning, and I watched the garbage truck crush it. That night, I heard soft plastic footsteps in the hall. The next day, a box sat on our porch with my name scrawled in red marker. Inside was the same toy, burn mark and all. My dad burned it in the backyard and buried the ashes, but 2 nights later, I woke to the smell of smoke and words written on my wall in soot. "You shouldn't have burned me." Soon, toys moved by themselves, and once I woke holding a piece of red ribbon just like the bear's bow tie. My mom started acting strange, and one night I overheard her whisper, "It was your brother's toy first." I didn't have a brother, or so I thought. I found an old photo album with pictures of a boy named Ethan, my age, holding that same bear. My parents finally admitted he was my brother who died at 9 after falling down the basement stairs while chasing that toy. That night I saw 2 glowing eyes in my closet. We called a priest who blessed the house and told us to burn everything that belonged to Ethan. We did, but that night I saw a half-melted figure standing near the garden where the ashes were buried. It waved at me. The next morning, tiny footprints led from the garden to my window. The haunting grew worse. Static voices on my baby sister's monitor whispering, "Can Daniel come play?" One night during a blackout, I heard plastic creaking behind me. The bear was standing upright, eyes blazing. "You're not him," it said in 2 voices. "You took my room. You took my mom." I screamed. My dad rushed in, grabbed me, and we fled the house that night. We never went back. Years later, I drove past the abandoned place. Windows boarded, grass overgrown. On the porch sat a small box, damp from rain. Inside, wrapped in blackened cloth, was a melted red bow tie. Burned into the cardboard were 2 words, "Miss me?" When I was around 10 years old, my family moved into a small town in Ohio. It was one of those quiet neighborhoods where every house looked old enough to have a story of its own. My dad had just gotten a new job and the rent was cheap, so we packed up and left our apartment in the city. The house was big, with creaky wooden floors, tall windows, and that strange smell of dust mixed with something wet, like rain that never really dried. I remember the first time I saw it. The basement door stood at the end of a narrow hallway, darker than the rest of the house. My mom said, "That's off limits, honey. There's mold down there." But even at 10, I could tell she wasn't being honest. She looked scared when she said it. The first few weeks were fine. I got used to the new school, the backyard, and the big maple tree that leaned toward my window like it was trying to peek inside. But every night, when the lights went out, I'd hear a faint noise coming from the floor below. It wasn't the pipes, not the wind. It sounded like soft humming, the kind a kid makes when they're playing alone. I told my parents, but my dad said it was probably the house settling, and my mom told me to stop imagining things. Still, every night around 3 a.m., I'd hear that same faint hum, followed by a creak, like something rocking back and forth. One afternoon, it started to rain, the kind of heavy rain that makes everything outside vanish behind a blur. The power flickered and went out completely. My parents were upstairs lighting candles, and I decided to grab the flashlight from the kitchen drawer. When I walked past the hallway, I saw that the basement door was slightly open, just enough for me to see darkness spilling out like fog. Something about it felt wrong, but curiosity has a way of ignoring fear when you're a kid. I stepped closer, calling softly, "Mom?" No answer, just the sound of dripping water somewhere below. I aimed the flashlight down the steps. Dust floated in the beam like tiny ghosts. The air grew colder with every step I took. Halfway down, I felt the floor vibrate, like someone had just moved a heavy box. I almost turned back, but then I saw it. A small wooden rocking chair near the far corner, gently swaying on its own. My first thought was the wind, but there were no windows open, no vents blowing. The basement was sealed tight. Then I heard it, a laugh, high-pitched, soft, and close. Too close. I turned the flashlight toward the sound, and that's when I saw her. A little girl, maybe 8 or 9. She was sitting on the floor, her knees pulled to her chest, wearing a white dress that looked soaked, like she'd been out in the rain for hours. Her hair was long and stringy, sticking to her pale skin. She didn't move at first, just stared at me with those huge, empty eyes. Then, in a voice that didn't sound like it came from her mouth, she whispered, "You took them." I froze. "Took what?" I asked before I could stop myself. She tilted her head slightly, and the room seemed to grow darker around her. "My toys," she said. "Give them back." I remember my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I shook my head and backed up a step. "I didn't take anything," I said, my voice shaking. She smiled, a slow, unnatural smile that made her lips tremble. "Liar," she whispered. The light in my hand flickered, and before it went out, I saw something move behind her. Shapes, like small shadows crawling on the floor. I bolted up the stairs, slammed the door, and didn't stop running until I reached the living room. I didn't tell my parents that night. I couldn't. I thought they'd never believe me. But later, as I lay in bed, I started hearing it again. That faint rocking sound, the creak of wood. I pulled the blanket over my head and waited for sleep to come. At around 3 in the morning, I woke up to something soft pressing against my side. When I turned on my bedside lamp, I saw it, a small, dirty doll sitting next to me. It was old, with cracked porcelain skin and a faded dress that looked exactly like the one the girl was wearing. I screamed. My parents ran in, but when they saw the doll, they thought I'd found it somewhere in the basement. My mom just said, "Don't touch that again," and threw it into the trash. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen, and the doll was sitting on the table. My mom swore she'd thrown it out. Dad thought maybe I pulled it out again, but I didn't. That night, I locked my door and kept the light on. Around midnight, I heard small footsteps just outside my room. The doorknob turned, slowly, as if someone was trying not to wake me. I stayed perfectly still, pretending to be asleep. The knob stopped moving. Silence. Then a whisper, right by my ear even though the door hadn't opened. "You still have them." The next few days were a blur. I tried avoiding the basement completely, but I could still hear noises from there. Sometimes whispers, sometimes the faint sound of a lullaby. One afternoon, I came home early from school. My parents weren't back yet. The house was silent except for that low humming again. Against my better judgment, I followed it. The basement door was open wider this time, and the air coming from below was cold enough to make me shiver. I remember telling myself it was just my imagination, just a weird house. But when I took one step down, the door slammed shut behind me. I screamed, banging on the door, but it wouldn't move. My flashlight beam flickered across the floor, and that's when I saw the boxes lined up neatly in a row. Each one had something written on it in black marker. Names. I read a few. Samantha, Eli, Rose. Then I saw a small open box at the end, and the label said, Adam. My name. Inside were old toys, trucks, marbles, and a doll's head with one eye missing. I stumbled back, confused, terrified. "Why is my name here?" I shouted. And then from the darkness came her voice again. "Because you were next." The rocking chair began to move violently, banging against the wall. I ran up the stairs, slamming my shoulder into the door until it finally gave way. I didn't look back. That night I begged my parents to let us move. My dad got angry, said I was making stories. My mom didn't speak at all. But when I looked at her, I realized she was pale, the same kind of pale as that little girl. A week later, the real nightmare began. My dad went down to the basement to fix a pipe and didn't come back up for almost an hour. When he did, he looked confused, almost lost. He kept saying there was nothing down there, but his hands were covered in dirt, and in one of them, he was holding something, a small, broken toy truck. My toy truck, the one I'd lost when I was 6, years before we ever moved there. That night, my mom locked the basement door and put a chair in front of it. She didn't explain why. I remember waking up at exactly 3:07 a.m. to the sound of the chair scraping across the floor. The door creaked open on its own. I wanted to scream for my parents, but I couldn't make a sound. I saw something standing at the end of the hallway, small, still, and wet, like she had just come out of the rain again. She whispered, "Playtime's over." The next morning, the basement door was open wide. My dad said he hadn't touched it. My mom was sitting at the table, holding the same doll that had been thrown away. Her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying. She just kept whispering, "She was mine first. She was mine first." 2 days later, we left the house. My dad said it was because of plumbing issues, but I knew the truth. We left everything behind, furniture, dishes, even some of our clothes. But when we unpacked at the new place, there it was again. The doll, sitting on top of my box, smiling that same cracked smile. Years have passed since then. I'm 27 now, living in a different state, and sometimes I tell myself it was all just the imagination of a scared kid. But every few months I get a package in the mail, no return address, just a small box. Inside, there's always a toy. Old, broken, and covered in dust. Last week, I got another one. It was the same rocking chair from that basement, small enough to fit in the palm of my hand. And carved into the wood, barely visible, was a name. My name. Now I keep it locked in a drawer. But sometimes at night I can hear it, creaking, rocking back and forth, waiting.